Are you ready to boost your confidence when selling so you're able to close more deals? Nikki Roush will show you how to build a foundation of skills and a mindset that creates sales success without feeling pushy or salesy and without fear of rejection. She is a sales strategist and coach with more than 25 years of sales experience and is master certified in neuro-linguistic programming. This is a radically different approach to selling. It's a no sleaze, no slime, and no stress approach to building your business. This is Sales Maven. Here's Nikki.
Welcome, and thank you for listening to the Sales Maven Show. I'm your host, Nikki Roush, your own personal sales maven, and I'm here to offer you tips, techniques, and strategies to master your sales conversation. In today's episode, we are going to talk about how to know when you're word vomiting on people and what to do instead, of course. Now, as we get into this topic, the idea here is not to beat yourself up if you find that, oh my gosh, I might be guilty of this. It's to have some awareness and then start to look for opportunities where you can make some slight adjustments. Because when you learn how to be more strategic in your sales conversation, the sale gets so much easier for you, and also, the experience for the client or the prospect is so much better. Like, think about your own situations when you are the buyer and you have a really pleasant conversation with somebody. They give you exactly what you need. They're a good listener. They don't over talk or talk over you, and they don't share information that isn't relevant to your situation, like all those things. And it's like, it just feels so good when somebody is more strategic in the conversation. So I want to talk a little bit about this today. And it makes sense here to bring in a little bit about what I teach around creating curiosity. And if you haven't heard me talk about this before, this might sound a little crazy. And if you have heard me talk about this before, I hope this is a good thing for you just to refresh your memory. But this idea of word vomiting oftentimes comes when people are trying to create curiosity. And when I think about curiosity, I always compare it to how you call a dog versus how you call a cat. So people who have this, what I call dog calling energy, it's like they're talking to a dog. So think about if you want to call your dog and you do this thing where you're like, come here, boy, come here. And it's like, it's super exciting. And the dog's like, oh my gosh, we're going to do something really fun now. So of course I'm going to come to you. And when you show up in your sales conversations and you're like, oh my gosh, there's somebody in front of me and I'm so excited to like earn this person's business, or I know I can help this person. I'm super, super excited. You have dog calling energy. And that really turns people off. It's too much. It's overwhelming. And I'm sure you know what it's like because you have probably been on the receiving end of dog calling energy. Now, there might be some part of you that's like, yeah, but that's my personality and, take me as I am, which, that's one way to be. When you learn how to add some flexibility to your behavior, again, things get easier, not just for you, but for the prospect or the client. And the object of sales is to make the experience amazing for the person who you want to earn their business. So if you're willing to tone down some of this dog calling energy, this word vomiting, like you have to use, I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where you go like, this person uses 100 words when they could use 10. And I think there's I should have looked this up before I started this episode because now it just came to mind for me. But I think there's a saying about like with a writer that it's really easy to just write a ton of words. It's actually much harder to be really concise and succinct and get your point across. And yet in sales, this is a more effective way to sell when you are not doing so much talking, because we don't like to be word vomited on. We get word vomited all over all the time by all kinds of people. So it's really important to watch for cues that people give that will indicate to you like, oh, maybe I need to tone it down a little bit. And I'm going to give you some suggestions here of how to do things a little bit differently. But here are some indicators that people give when they're starting to feel word vomited on. So when you can actually see their face, their eyes will start to glaze over, or they'll stop making much eye contact with you. They'll start looking around, they'll look down. That's usually an indicator they'd like you to stop talking. So be willing to pay attention to these things. The other thing is when you are really excited to share with somebody and you have a lot to say and you feel like, I have to tell them all the things. But actually, to earn somebody's business, you don't have to tell them all the things. You just need to tell them what they want and need to know in order to make a decision to hire you. You don't have to tell them all the things you know. Because think about it. You're an expert. You are so good at what you do and you know a lot. You know, if I talked about sales, like if somebody said, tell me everything you know about sales, Nikki, I probably could talk for days. I love the topic. I find it super interesting. I have a lot of stories, as you may know, if you're a podcast listener. So I could talk for days about sales, but that is not how to earn somebody's business. I don't really need to prove to somebody I know everything about sales, which of course I don't, because I don't know everything about anything. But the idea sometimes is that we feel compelled that we have to tell people everything, or we have to tell them so much to prove to them that we are experts. I actually posed this question in the Sales Maven Society recently about your own story. Do you feel it's important for a prospect to know your story in order to earn their business? And there was a lot of mixed comments around this, and people, there were some definite yeses. People felt very strongly. Sometimes it had to do with like specifically what it is that they're selling, and other people were like, nope, not at all. I would say for me, I don't really ever feel compelled to share my background and story with people when I'm talking to a prospect, unless they ask. So there's no right or wrong answer. It's just knowing how much information do you need to share. And then I asked a second question of the Sales Maven Society, and it was, is it important for a prospect to know is it important to them, not to you, but to the prospect to know your story in order to hire you? And again, there were some mixed comments, some yeses, some nos. But I want you to think about that question a little bit, because if you feel like you have to tell people all the things or tell them everything about you to try to boost yourself up to earn their business, I'd really think about what are the things you're actually sharing, because you might be sharing way more than you need to. Now, if the answer is no, Nikki, I absolutely need to share, great, fine. But be strategic in the conversation. Make sure you aren't just word vomiting all over people. Now, here's another indicator that often means you're probably word vomiting a little bit, is people start to check the time. Now, I've noticed on Zoom that you can watch people's eyes. Now, I have been trained in eye accessing cues from my background in neurolinguistic programming. And so I love to watch eye accessing cues. I love to watch what people do with their eyes, because there's a lot of information that can come here. But one of the things that you'll notice is most of us, the time on our computer is in the upper right-hand corner. So when you see people's eyes going to the upper right-hand corner, when you're on Zoom with them, you might start to notice they might be checking the time. And does that mean that you're taking too much time talking? And you probably need to check in with them, because if a client is starting to worry, a prospect is starting to worry about the time, it could be because they have another appointment and they might want to just wrap it up with you, or you're going to run out of time to actually do the selling part. So it's important to watch for these cues. Now, I want to share a story with you that happened a couple weeks ago. I don't know if I've shared on the podcast yet. I probably have in some episode that my husband and I recently just moved from Washington State to Idaho to be closer to family. There's some family here that we want to spend our downtime with. And so we made this big move. But before we moved, my husband had lived in his home for 27 years. And so to get it ready to go on the market, there was a lot of activity that needed to happen. There were some updates, getting stuff like kind of more current. So it's going to do really well on the market, fingers crossed. It's actually still not on the market yet. Hopefully it will have sold by the time this episode airs. But that just meant that there was a lot of contractors that he was having to work with. And then, he was taking care of that side of the move. I was taking care of all the stuff here to get us ready to get to Idaho. So hiring packers and movers and getting all the utilities and all that stuff set up here in Boise. And my husband, one day I was between appointments. It was my lunch hour and we needed to run out and do a couple quick errands. We needed to run by my bank and do something. I can't remember where else we needed to go. And we had agreed we were just going to run through a quick drive-through, get something to eat. We were going to have all these discussions in the car of catching up of all these things we needed to get through because we were down to the wire. It was the last couple weeks before our move. And, he had called a bunch of contractors that morning, and it just happened that as we were pulling into the place to go through the drive-through, his phone rang, and it was a contractor that he wanted to hire to do some refresh of the gas fireplace. So they were going to clean it up. They were going to fix a part that wasn't working right. So he'd reached out to a couple contractors. So phone rings, it's the contractor. So he pulls off to the side, he doesn't actually go through the drive-through. He pulls off to the side and he takes the call. So I'm feeling some pressure because I have a client that I need to get back to. We have one more errand to run. I'd like to have lunch. And the conversation starts. So I'm sitting in the passenger seat and I can hear this guy on the phone. So my husband answers. The guy starts and he says, so you called me about getting your fireplace done. Is now a good time to talk? And Joel says, yes, we can talk now. So he says, well, what's going on? So Joel explains it and he goes, well, here's all the things that it could be. And he tells Joel all the things that could be wrong and how to fix them. Now, keep in mind, all Joel is trying to understand is, does this guy have time to come out in the next 2 days to fix this? And what is it going to cost us to do this? So he tells Joel all the things that it could be. And he says, now I only know that based on what you've said, but here's all the things it's definitely not. And then he goes through a laundry list of things that it's not. So I can hear this. I'm sitting on the, in the passenger seat and I'm starting to get a little bit annoyed because I'm I really hate when people tell you all the things it's not and why, because it's word vomiting and it's totally irrelevant. And then he tells Joel, and by the way, this is because, I know these things because I've been in business for 50 years, not 40. I've been in business for 50 years. And Joel's like, okay. And he goes, and while we're in there, maybe you want us to do this other thing. There's something about a diaphragm in the fireplace that blah, blah, blah. And he talks about the diaphragm. And then I hear him say to Joel, when the ladies come in, when you want to buy this house, they're going to look at this, the ladies know about the diaphragm. And I'm sitting there, my eyes get big and I look at Joel and Joel looks at me and I'm like, what in the world? Why would he be talking about that? So then he goes on to explain that he actually isn't available in the next couple days, but his son is, and his son works for him. Then he tells us his son's name, his son's age, his son's hobbies, and he goes through a list of all of his son's hobbies, including fishing, and all the good places to fish. And then he asked Joel, now you mentioned that you're moving. Are you moving in state or are you moving out of state? Which again, has absolutely nothing to do with what this sales call is for, right? Now, at this point, I have to say, Joel and I both have extensive backgrounds as professional sales rep. Like he's retired and had a very successful career in sales. And so now I've moved from being frustrated to being completely tickled over the fact that, if you knew my husband, he doesn't have a ton of patience, although he is like the best guy in the whole world, but he doesn't have a lot of patience. And I can see him starting to get frustrated. And so it's starting to make me giggle. Like, I don't know why, but it tickles me when he when he has to be in like really bad sales situations, because he's such a phenomenal salesperson. So he's like, which, by the way, is another indicator that you are word vomiting on people. When they start doing the you need to stop. This guy, he's not taking cues. I mean, he's been in business for 50 years, not 40, but 50. So then he goes on and he starts telling Joel, like he guesses where we're moving, which is kind of an interesting observation. Every single person in Washington that we did business with, contractors, when we mentioned that we were moving out of state, I'm not even exaggerating here, every single person said, "You're moving to Idaho, right?" So apparently this is a really hot place to move right now. So he says, "You're moving to Idaho, right?" And Joel says, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, you probably think that I know that because I have caller ID, but I actually don't have caller ID." Then he goes on to tell Joel about all the people who have moved to Idaho. He's talking about cop families. He keeps saying cop families, and he's naming these cop families as if Joel knows who these people are, which of course he doesn't. So now even Joel's starting to get a little bit tickled by this because it's so over the top that we're like sitting there. We can't even make eye contact because we're both trying not to laugh. And Joel's just trying to get off the phone. Like, are you coming? Are you not coming? Then the guy goes on to talk about guns. He talks about lesbians. He talks about red states versus blue states. And then he says he's going to call his son and ask his son if he can come and look at the fireplace and fix it tomorrow, is there agreed on. So now Joel's more interested again. So he's like, okay, great. And he says, "So I'm going to call my son. He stops working at 3, but I can't call him till 5. And he's just giving so much detail instead of just saying like, here's what could be wrong with your fireplace. My son could come over tomorrow. I'll call you later to let you know if we can make it or not. Like that could have been all the conversation that was needed. But instead, he's giving all this extra detail. And then he says what I consider to be one of the kiss, like this is like the kiss of death in sales. Like, don't say these things. And he says, if you decide not to hire us, no hard feelings. It's like, you don't ever need to say those types of statements. And then as we're getting off the phone, he says to Joel, you can get 6. That was as they were hanging up. Joel goes, excuse me? He says, you can get 6. Joel says, 6 what? He goes, 6 wolves. In Idaho, you can kill 6 wolves. Which, frankly, I don't know if that's true or not. We're not gun people. We didn't move here to be in a red state. We're not, Joel's not a guy who goes out and hunts and fishes. And that's no judgment about people who do. It's just, that's not our lifestyle. But it's such a weird way to end the call. So when Joel gets off the phone, like we are super tickled at this point and I actually pulled out my phone and I wrote down notes about this because I'm like, I'm going to share this story. This is insane what just happened. And I was like, and I can't wait to see what his son's like. Like if his son really can come tomorrow and fix the fireplace, I can't wait to see what his son's like, which of course turned out I wasn't home because I was off doing errands. But his son did come over. He did fix the fireplace. Joel said he wasn't quite as talkative. He didn't have as much to say, but he did a good job. The fact that Joel even gave him his business was shocking to me. I thought for sure he wouldn't. Frankly, I wouldn't have, just because of the word vomiting, but it did become funny to us. And I love a story. So it was fun to have the story. But as you can tell, there was a lot shared there, right? And I went through it kind of slow and I had these little side notes as I was telling it to you. But the idea here is this is what happens when people overshare. They bring in all this like irrelevant data, all of this irrelevant information that can overwhelm people. And frankly, it should have cost this guy again his business, but Joel is so desperate at this point to just get stuff done that he ended up hiring him, and they did a great job. It wasn't like a bad hire. It's not somebody I would have given my business to, because I always say, vote with your wallet. Don't give your business to people who don't sell well. But I know sometimes people make exceptions. So I want to share with you, when you find yourself in these places of you're starting to think like, oh, I'm getting some indicators from this person that maybe they're not in the conversation. So I should probably check in with them. Maybe I'm oversharing. And maybe it's because you're nervous. I do find a lot of times with working with my clients, when we dig into these places where they're oversharing, it's usually from a place of nerves. So one of the things that I always recommend is managing your internal state. Now, I know I've done an episode on this. I'll have to go back and find which one it is. An episode about managing your internal state, which is super important, because when you can manage your internal state of mind, it helps cut down on some of the nerves, and it helps cut down on some of that like useless chatter that can happen. I'm trying to think of, let's see. I was going to see if I could find the episode really quickly here of which one where I talk about your internal state. I'm going to have to look it up and put it in the show notes. It's not popping out to me right away, but the idea here is manage your internal state before you get on the call to help cut down on the nerves. And then be willing to pay attention to the other person if they're giving you cues. And check in and ask questions. And I'm going to give you a couple questions. If you're not getting a lot from the person that you are communicating with, from the prospect, this is one of my favorite questions, by the way. It's a non-context specific question. And you could just say to somebody, if appropriate in this situation, how are we doing so far? And then you wait and you let them answer. Don't say, how are we doing so far? And then word vomit again the answer to them, because then you're missing the point of this episode. But just say, how are we doing so far? And see what they say next, because what they say next to a non-specific or non-context specific question like that oftentimes will give you some indicator of like, what's this person thinking about? And then now you might know that, oh, you need to switch gears, or maybe you need to focus on one particular area, or maybe it's time to bring the conversation to a close. The other question that you can ask if you're getting a lot of the or again, they're not making a lot of eye contact with you, something has changed in the conversation, like you can feel it in the energy between you two, you could say, what, if anything, haven't I covered yet that you'd like to know? Now, when you ask these questions, your job is to zip it after you ask the question and actually let them answer. And if you don't remember to ask either of those two questions, here is my third thing that you can do. And you can do this in any conversation, in any context. You can stop talking. You can actually stop mid-sentence when you get an indicator to yourself like, ooh, I might be talking too much. Just stop talking, take a breath, because more than likely, the other person will then choose that opportunity to speak up, or will let you know kind of what it is that they want to do next. All right. So I hope this was helpful. I hope my story was okay. I debated about whether sharing it with you, but it was such a great story of oversharing and word vomiting that I just felt like you had to hear it. And, you can get 6 in case you ever need to know that. I don't know. All right. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. Really appreciate the feedback from everybody. If you are finding value in this podcast and you are really ready to ignite your sales, I want to invite you to join the Sales Maven Society. The Society is my membership platform. This is where my training is housed on sales. There's a myriad of trainings there on all different types of sales topics. And there's a very robust resource center there for you. But this is really an opportunity for you and I to work together. You bring your questions and concerns and your sales situations, and I provide answers and guidance to boost your confidence in all your sales situations. And you can join the Sales Maven Society by going to www.salesmavensociety.com and hit add to cart. This is a monthly membership. It's $97 a month when you're hearing this episode, although the price is going up. I'm just going to say that right now. So when you get there, if the price has gone up, it's just because you're listening to this episode later than when it aired. But I'm going to give you a coupon code to join for your first month. So you can come in and check it out and see, is this the right place for you? It is an incredible community of people. If you've listened to some of the on-air coaching calls, you know that the people that are in there are phenomenal. They're incredibly supportive of each other. We would love to have you join. And I am in there daily, answering questions, sharing observations, sharing techniques. I do bonus trainings regularly for this group. So there's quite a bit of opportunity for us to engage and interact. So here's the coupon code. When you hit the add to cart and then you hit checkout, it will take you to a page where there is a place to put a coupon code. And here's the coupon code. It's 27trial, all one word, 27trial. This is going to get you your first month in the society for only $27. So this is what is that, like a 70% savings? Come check it out, join, and see if this is the place for you. If nothing else, if you go through one of the training modules in there, it will have been worth that $27 for you. So I'd love to have you join. And in the meantime, you're welcome to reach out, connect with me on social media. I'd love for us to connect on LinkedIn. You can find me as Nikki Roush. Connect with me on, Facebook. I'm there regularly, and also on Instagram under Your Sales Maven. Have a great rest of your day. Take care.
Thanks for listening to Sales Maven. Visit us online at yoursalesmaven.com/maven for more resources to boost your confidence and skills.